For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4366 as it's been amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4366, a bill to strengthen the federal education research system to make research and evaluations more timely and relevant to state and local needs in order to increase student achievement.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Rokita, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Miller, will each control 20 minutes of this debate. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 4366.
Without objection, the gentleman's request is so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Strengthening Education Through Research Act. It's legislation to improve the quality and usefulness of education research. Mr. Speaker, more than a decade ago, Congress approved the Education Sciences Reform Act. That was legislation that established the Institute of Education Sciences to gather information on education progress, conduct research on education practices in schools, and evaluate the effectiveness of federal education programs and initiatives. Like many of my colleagues, I believe the federal government's role in education needs to be significantly reduced. And that is why we passed the Student Success Act last summer, comprehensive education reform legislation that will actually shrink the federal footprint in the classroom and return control to the parents, the teachers, and community leaders who in fact know our children best. In fact, I would challenge anyone here on the floor to say that any person or bureaucrat at the Department of Education knows our kids better than their own teachers, parents, and the local taxpayer. So while we continue to await Senate action on the Student Success Act, we have additional opportunities now to act on common sense proposals that will make the federal role in education more effective and efficient. The research produced by the Institute sheds critical light on how taxpayer dollars are being used in our education system and can provide important information on what is and is not working in our schools. Mr. Speaker, the Strengthening Education Through Research Act will improve education research, protect taxpayers by enhancing program accountability, and help ensure more schools and students can benefit from effective education practices. This law provides information that helps states and school districts identify successful education practices and allows taxpayers and congressional leaders to monitor the federal investment in education. However, the Education Sciences Reform Act is overdue for reform, with several weaknesses in the law that must be addressed now. For example, according to a report by the Government Accountability Office, the Institute does not always properly evaluate the effectiveness of its programs and research arms. So we run into an issue where we could be throwing good money after bad, and that needs to stop. It could lead to unnecessary costs and redundancies, something we must be particularly wary of in these times of fiscal restraint. Additionally, although the Institute has dramatically improved the quality of education research in recent years, there is often a significant delay in disseminating the key data and findings to education leaders nationwide. What good does it do for us to pay to conduct this research, to collect the data, but fail to disseminate it so it can be used? The Supporting Education Through Research Act will address these weaknesses and help school leaders access more timely, more relevant, and more useful information on the most effective educational practices. That's called transparency, Mr. Speaker, and that's good for the students, it's good for the teachers, it's good for the parents, it's good for the taxpayers, it's good for all of us. First, H.R. 4366 will enhance the relevancy of education research, ensuring teachers, students, parents, and policymakers can access and actually use more useful information about what is successful, working, and what isn't. Second, the legislation will take steps to streamline the education research system and reduce overlap and duplicative research efforts. Now, this bill will also require the Institute to regularly evaluate its research and review the efficacy of federal education programs, ensuring taxpayer resources are being put to good use. Finally, H.R. 4366 will ensure that the Institute and the National Assessment Governing Board, which administers the nation's report card, remain autonomous entities that are free from political influence and bias. And unfortunately, that political influence and bias exists in our education system and research and could exist in our research arms if we don't, as Congress, make clear what's expected of them. Not only does this legislation help teachers, school leaders, and state and local governments, it also helps families, particularly military families. They can change school districts several times during their child's education. Our experience with the free market tells us that informed consumers are in fact the best consumers and the best protected consumers. And as consumers of education, families deserve the best information possible in making decisions regarding their child's education. So, Mr. Speaker, the Strengthening Education Through Research Act will improve education research, it will protect taxpayers by enhancing program accountability, and it will help ensure more schools and students can actually benefit from effective education practices. For all these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support the Strengthening Education Through